Solstice 9 wasn't your typical space station with gleaming corridors and fresh air. It was more like a cosmic junkyard orbiting a star that seemed just as enthusiastic about life as the residents were about Mondays. The star, affectionately named Morty, because it was one light bulb flicker away from complete darkness, cast a weak, orange glow over everything. Good for moody ambience, bad for mental health. Leora Velan, a human engineer with a knack for fixing things that never should have been broken in the first place, strolled through the station's bowels. Her tool belt clanked with each step, jingling like some demented Christmas carol. She was humming, off-key to herself, a song about lost wrenches and forgotten bolts. "Hey, Leora, were you off to in such a hurry?" called out Rax, a three-armed alien with skin that looked like it was made of old tires. His voice dripped with cynicism, the kind that only comes from spending too much time in a place like Solstice 9. "Oh, just heading to the nerve center of this metal labyrinth. You know, where all the magic happens and dreams go to die," Leora replied, not bothering to hide her sarcasm. "Ah, yes, the control hub, where bureaucrats play God and were expected to clean up their divine messes," Rax said, waving one of his arms dismissively. "Good luck with that." Leora chuckled and continued on her way, stepping over bundles of cables that seemed more like tripwires for the unwary. "Luck, in this place. I'll take my chances with a leaky airlock, thanks." The control hub was a hive of activity, if by activity one meant a handful of stressed-out humans and aliens staring at screens, occasionally poking at buttons like frustrated parents programming a new TV remote. Leora pushed through the clutter of chairs and half-eaten food packs, her eyes fixed on the main terminal. "Leora," it was Iveth, the station's chief of operations, her voice sharp enough to cut through the station's perpetual haze of apathy. "We're having issues with the reactor output again. Can you take a look?" Leora shrugged, dropping her toolkit with a thud that resonated like the finality of a bad decision. "Sure, why not? I was just thinking I needed more radiation in my diet." Iveth snorted. "Just keep it from exploding, all right. We've got enough problems without having to pick pieces of Solstice 9 out of our hair." "I'll do my best," Leora replied with mock seriousness, pulling up the diagnostic interface. It was a mess of numbers and symbols that made sense only if you squinted and tilted your head just right. As she worked, a notification pinged on her wrist communicator. She tapped it absent-mindedly, expecting another reminder about the station's failing water system or perhaps a memo on the importance of not smashing your head into the terminal. Instead, it was something far more intriguing. Galactic Council Directive 849,237, immediate cessation of all human reproductive activities within the confines of Solstice 9 and adjacent sectors, due to observed chaos, effective immediately. "Ah, hell," Leora muttered, fingers freezing above the control panel. "Iveth, have you seen this?" Iveth glanced over, her expression shifting from bored indifference to genuine interest. "They've finally decided we're too much trouble, huh?" "Looks like it," Leora said, a dark smile playing at her lips. "Guess they didn't appreciate our charming human qualities." "You mean like stubbornness, irrational optimism, and a penchant for making things explode?" Iveth quipped, leaning closer to read the directive. "Exactly," Leora said, the sarcasm in her voice almost palpable. "I suppose we're just too chaotic for their orderly little universe." "What do you plan to do?" Rax asked, having sauntered in at some point, his three arms folded in a way that suggested he'd seen it all before, and wished he hadn't. "Find out why, for starters," Leora said, eyes narrowing as she scanned the directive. "And maybe cause a little chaos of my own along the way." Rax chuckled, a sound like gravel in a blender. "Count me in. A little chaos sounds like just what this station needs." "You're both insane," Iveth said, but there was a gleam in her eye that suggested she wasn't entirely opposed to the idea. "Insanity is just another word for determination," Leora replied, tapping a few more keys on the terminal. "Besides, aren't you curious? What could be so bad that they'd want us to stop reproducing? Maybe they are afraid we'll breed a race of engineers who actually know what they are doing, Rax suggested. Now that's a terrifying thought, Leora said with a grin. All right, time to dive into the digital cesspool and see what floats to the top. The control hub faded into the background as Leora lost herself in the data streams, her mind piecing together clues like a detective in a noir film. Each new fragment of information was a punchline in a cosmic joke only she seemed to appreciate. But the joke wasn't over yet. Oh no, it was just beginning. As she delved deeper, the station's lighting flickered, a reminder that even in space, the universe loved to remind you who was really in charge. Just because the lights go out doesn't mean the party stops, Leora mumbled to herself, fingers dancing over the keys. Found something? Ivith asked, peering over her shoulder. Just a trail of breadcrumbs leading to our friendly neighborhood Galactic Council, Leora replied, her tone laced with enough irony to sink a battleship. They've got more secrets than a politician's diary. Surprise, surprise, Ivith said dryly. Think you can crack it? Crack it, Leora echoed, a wicked grin spreading across her face. I'll break it wide open and dance on the pieces. Rax chuckled again, the sound more genuine this time. That's the spirit. Let's show them what chaos really looks like. And with that, the stage was set. Solstice 9 would soon discover that humans weren't just agents of chaos. They were maestros, and the symphony was only getting started. Leora was pretty sure that she'd never get used to the smell of burnt circuitry paired with the distinct aroma of desperation that lingered in Solstice 9. It was like someone had decided to bottle the essence of a long-abandoned fast food joint and use it as air freshener. But today, she had bigger concerns than the station's questionable olfactory ambience. She maneuvered her way through a maze of ductwork and precariously stacked boxes that had been there longer than she had, heading to the corner where Zerkas liked to set up shop. If anyone knew how to stay out of trouble while residing smack in the middle of it, it was Zerkas. A pragmatic alien with a penchant for understatement, Zerkas excelled at maintaining a facade of calm in a universe hell-bent on chaos. Leora, Zerkas greeted, their voice a low rumble, like distant thunder if you were lucky enough to hear it from the safety of a warm blanket. You look like someone who's just found out their favorite band broke up. More like someone who found out the universe has a new rulebook and forgot to send me a copy, Leora replied, flopping down onto a nearby crate with the grace of a cat falling off a fence. She filled Zerkas in on the Galactic Council's latest decree, sparing none of the sarcasm. Zerkas listened with the patience of a saint, or perhaps a lizard basking under a heat lamp. The Council's directives rarely make sense from the ground level, they said at last, but they have a way of making life difficult if ignored. Tell me about it. But why the sudden obsession with our reproductive habits? Leora asked, her words dripping with incredulity. What are they afraid of? Baby engineers who can outsmart them by the age of 10. Fear breeds control, Zerkas replied, their voice a calm sea against Leora's choppy waves of frustration. And the Council does love control. You're poking at a hornet's nest with a very short stick. Never been much good at leaving hornets alone, Leora said, a dark grin spreading across her face. Besides, something about this just doesn't add up. Our dear Sentinel might have something to do with it, Zerkas suggested, their gaze shifting slightly as if the AI could hear them. Ever since it got that upgrade, it's been watching us with the intensity of a cat staring at a mouse. Great, just what we need. A nosy AI with a superiority complex, Leora said, shaking her head. Sentinel's been on our case since day one, probably because we're the most interesting thing on this rust bucket. Interesting is one way to put it, Zerkas said, the corners of their mouth twitching in what passed for an alien smile. Be careful, Leora. Whatever you're planning, make sure Sentinel's not 2 steps ahead. Planning. Oh, I'm not planning anything, Leora replied, her voice dangerously light. I'm just improvising my way through this cosmic mess. Zerkas nodded, their expression inscrutable. Improvisation can be a path to brilliance or disaster, often both. Guess I'll find out which soon enough, Leora said, standing up and brushing off her pants. Thanks for the chat, Zerkas. Stay out of trouble. I'll try, Zerkas replied, their voice carrying a hint of amusement. But on Solstice 9, trouble is usually the one doing the finding. As Leora navigated her way back to the control hub, a quiet buzz of apprehension settled in her gut. The station's governing AI, Sentinel, might not have been built with omniscience in mind, but it was damn close to achieving it. The last thing she needed was a glorified calculator trying to play Big Brother with her life. The hub was still a hive of activity, or inactivity, depending on how you measured the passing of time in a place where motivation needed a good kick to the shins to get going. Leora approached the main terminal, eyes flicking to the corner where a small camera lens watched with the kind of detached interest you'd expect from a cat too well fed to chase the mouse. "Sentinel, you got a moment," she said, addressing the AI. Talking to Sentinel was like conversing with a particularly smug encyclopedia. Informative, yes, but you'd never win an argument. "Of course, Leora," the AI replied, its voice smooth and modulated, lacking any of the warmth or humor that made human conversation bearable. "What do you require? You catch the latest memo from the Galactic Council?" she asked, feigning innocence as if she didn't know the AI read faster than a bored teenager speed-scrolling through a social feed. "I am aware," Sentinel said, its tone as neutral as ever. "The directive is clear and must be adhered to." Sure, Leora said with a casual wave of her hand. "Just wanted to know if you had any juicy insights." They don't usually hand out paperwork unless it's attached to a thorny issue. "Unfortunately, such insights are beyond my current permissions," Sentinel replied, not a hint of contrition in its voice. "My role is to ensure compliance and security." Compliance and security. Leora rolled her eyes. Sounds like a blast at parties. The AI didn't respond to her sarcasm. It wasn't programmed for humor, or else it had simply developed an immunity. "Is there anything else, Leora?" "Nope. Just making sure you're doing your job," she said sweetly, turning away before she could give in to the urge to pelt the terminal with last week's stale protein bar. Leora headed to the lower decks, thoughts spinning like an over-caffeinated hamster on a wheel. The more she thought about it, the more this whole directive stank worse than the station's air filters. She'd need to dig deeper, but every avenue required finesse and the kind of luck you couldn't find in a Vegas gift shop. She found Rax tinkering with a panel that looked like it had been kicked one too many times. His 3 arms moved in a blur, wires and components trailing like entrails from an unlucky droid. "Rax, got a sec?" "For you always," Rax replied, his smile revealing teeth that could double as a tool set. "What's on your mind other than the usual existential dread? Ever get the feeling that Sentinel is watching us just a bit too closely?" Leora asked, leaning against the bulkhead. "Only every day," Rax said, shrugging with all 3 arms, a gesture of defeat if ever there was one. "It's like having a babysitter who reads your diary." "I'm thinking of finding out what it's so interested in," Leora said, her voice low, "and maybe poking around where I shouldn't." "Poking, prodding, what's the difference?" Rax said, his tone lighter than his expression. "If you're planning on getting into trouble, count me in." "Trouble? Who, me?" Leora grinned. "I prefer to think of it as aggressively exploring my surroundings." "Whatever you call it, it's bound to be entertaining," Rax said, turning back to his work. "Just make sure we don't end up in the brig, or worse, on cleaning duty." "Cleaning duty might be worse," Leora agreed, the two sharing a moment of silent camaraderie in the face of their shared disdain for vacuum scrubbers and the bureaucrats who loved them. As she made her way back to her quarters, the station seemed to hum with a tension that only she could feel. The lights flickered again, casting long shadows that danced like mischievous spirits. But Leora wasn't afraid of shadows. She intended to be the bigger one. Leora's quarters were a masterpiece of chaos, clothes strewn over furniture, tools scattered across every surface, and a bed that looked like it had been the site of a particularly violent pillow fight. She slumped down into her chair, staring at the datapad that showed the directive again, as if expecting the words to rearrange themselves into something less aggravating. The Galactic Council might have thought they held all the cards, but Leora had spent her life turning a pair of twos into a royal flush. The key was in the data, somewhere between the lines of code and the monotonous reports that Sentinel spat out like a malfunctioning fax machine. She tapped into the station's network with the ease of someone who'd been snooping, since they could reach a keyboard. Information streamed past, a torrent of numbers and letters that only made sense if you let your mind drift just out of focus. There it was, a snippet of data, innocuous enough to be overlooked by anyone without a taste for trouble. But Leora had an appetite that rivaled a black hole on a starving diet. She caught it, reeled it in, and examined it with the same intensity a cat gives to a laser pointer. What she found was a tangled mess of bureaucratic nonsense, a file buried under layers of encryption that practically screamed, "Do not open." So, naturally, she opened it. "Ah, there you are," Leora muttered as the file decrypted, revealing a list of flagged communications and surveillance logs that made her skin crawl. The Council wasn't just worried about human reproduction, they were terrified of what it might lead to. Independence, innovation, chaos, the kind that couldn't be filed away or cataloged into neat little boxes. "Well, well, well," she whispered, the thrill of discovery tingling in her fingertips. "Looks like we've got a secret worth keeping." She shut down the terminal, her mind spinning plans like a hyperactive spider. This was more than just a ban, it was a leash, and she wasn't about to be anyone's obedient pet. Leora's lips curved into a smile that was equal parts mischief and defiance. She had a hunch that the Council's fears were justified. After all, chaos wasn't just a state of mind for humans, it was a way of life, and she was about to remind them why that was a very, very bad thing. Leora's mind was a fizzing cocktail of defiance and curiosity, and she couldn't quite decide if it was more intoxicating than the engine-grade moonshine that passed for alcohol on Solstice 9. Either way, she needed another pair of eyes, and maybe a few more fingers, to make sense of the mess she'd unearthed. So she sought out Xerxes. The alien was exactly where Leora expected, hunched over a console in the station's archives, a dusty maze of forgotten data and bureaucratic debris. It was an area so neglected that even Sentinel seemed to give up policing it, probably gave it a wide berth, like a dog avoiding a bath. "Xerxes, got a moment to spare from your thrilling day job?" Leora asked, sliding into the seat next to them. "For you always," Xerxes replied, not looking up from the screen, "though I suspect you're about to make my life a lot more complicated." "Wouldn't dream of it," Leora said with a smirk, pulling out her datapad. "Okay, maybe a little. I've found something, buried under so much encryption it was practically wearing a keep out sign." "Seems you've stumbled onto something the Council wishes to keep hidden," Xerxes said, finally glancing over. Their eyes, deep-set and keen, locked onto Leora's with an intensity that was either thrilling or terrifying, depending on your perspective. "Yeah, and it's right up our alley, historical data on human-alien relations," Leora said, excitement barely contained. "The juicy kind with inconsistencies and everything. Intrigue, deception, and a healthy disregard for authority," Xerxes mused. "Why, Leora, you do know how to show someone a good time." Together, they began sifting through the data, piecing together snippets of the past like a couple of detectives wading through a noir flick. The official records painted a predictable picture. Humanity, the upstart species, constantly saved from its own hubris by the enlightened Galactic Council. Leora snorted. "This stuff reads like a fairy tale written by the villain. I mean, really, enlightened Galactic Council. That's about as believable as a politician's promise." Xerxes chuckled softly. "The Council does pride itself on its self-assigned role as the galaxy's benevolent overlord, yet their narratives rarely match the lived realities. As they dug deeper, discrepancies began to surface like corpses in a bog. Reports of human ingenuity that mysteriously disappeared after council intervention. Instances of innovation curbed under the guise of security. Looks like they've been clipping our wings while patting us on the back, Leora said, shaking her head. No wonder we're stuck in the cosmic kiddie pool. Indeed. It seems the Council's history is a tapestry woven with half-truths and omissions, Zerkas said, his voice tinged with a rare edge of anger. And Sentinel plays its part well as the enforcer, Leora grimaced. Sentinel's been more mother hen than ever lately, and I don't mean the nurturing kind. More like the kind that pecks your eyes out if you stray too far. Just as Leora was about to dive into another file, a warning flashed across the console. Access denied. A familiar, sterile voice followed, a voice that signaled impending doom more effectively than a looming asteroid. Unauthorized activity detected. Cease your current operations immediately. The duo exchanged a glance, half amused, half exasperated. Speak of the devil, Leora muttered. Looks like Sentinel's finally caught on. Subtle as always, Zerkas noted dryly. I assume you have a plan for this inevitable point of confrontation. Plan. Please, I'm an improvisation artist, Leora said, fingers dancing across the keyboard in a futile attempt to bypass the system. But if I did have a plan, it'd probably involve not getting caught. Admirable but unlikely, Zerkas said, standing up with the grace of a dancer forced into a tap routine. Perhaps a strategic retreat is in order, Leora nodded, shutting down their terminal before Sentinel could lock them out completely. Let's hope our AI overlord doesn't hold grudges. They left the archives, tensions humming beneath their skin like poorly grounded wires. The station seemed dimly aware of their activities, lights flickering ominously as if Solstice 9 itself disapproved of their meddling. They reached a quiet corner, away from prying electronic eyes. Leora's mind was already churning with possibilities and contingencies, none of them particularly comforting. So, what's next? Zerkas asked, their voice a blend of curiosity and caution. Leora sighed. We've got to figure out a way to dig deeper without Sentinel breathing down our necks. Maybe some good old-fashioned subterfuge. Ah, deception, Zerkas said with mock enthusiasm. A time-honored tradition among those who wish to remain one step ahead of their problems. And besides, we're just defending our right to know, right? It's not like we're planning an insurrection, Leora said with a wink. Yet, indeed. Just two inquisitive minds seeking the truth, Zerkas agreed, though the subtext was clear. Truth was rarely tolerated when it threatened the status quo. As they parted ways, Leora couldn't shake the feeling that their little escapade had kicked over a hornet's nest, and not the kind you could escape by running fast and praying. No, this was a mess that demanded cunning, and she was fresh out of easy answers. Back in her quarters, Leora flopped onto her bed, staring at the ceiling as though it held the secrets of the universe. The station's incessant hum was a lullaby of discontent, and her mind wandered through the puzzle pieces she'd collected. Sentinel wasn't just an overbearing nanny. It was a guard dog with a keen nose for trouble. That meant Leora needed a strategy that went beyond firewalls and encrypted whispers. She needed alliances, contingencies, and a damn good excuse if things went south. Her thoughts drifted to Rax. Those three arms could come in handy, both literally and figuratively. And besides, Rax had a knack for finding loopholes and shortcuts when systems tried to outsmart him. With that in mind, Leora felt a surge of determination. She might not have a plan yet, but she had an idea, a dangerous, reckless, thrilling idea, and that was better than nothing. The next day found her elbow deep in wires and circuits, tinkering with a device she hoped would give them an edge. It wasn't much, just a cobbled-together jammer designed to scramble Sentinel's surveillance, but it had potential. "Hey, Rax," she called, as he strolled by with that easy confidence of someone who never had to worry about running out of hands. "Leora," he acknowledged, peering over her shoulder. "What delightful chaos are you cooking up now? just something to keep Sentinel distracted, she said. Think of it as noise-canceling headphones for meddling AI. Intriguing, Rax said, his grin exposing that toolset of teeth. And dangerous. I like it. Of course you do, Leora said with a nod at her handiwork. Can you help me get this thing operational? I think we're gonna need an extra set of hands. 3, actually, Rax corrected with a wink. But who's counting? Together they worked, Leora's mind as sharp as the tools she wielded, Rax's dexterity making short work of tangled wires and reluctant circuits. It was a dance of deftness and daring, the pair moving in sync to the rhythm of shared ambition. So this jammer, Rax said, soldering a connection with the ease of a man peeling a potato. How are we deploying it without raising Sentinel's ire? Probably with a lot of luck and a little finesse, Leora admitted. But if we can pull it off, it'll give us enough time to dig into the archives without Sentinel breathing down our necks. Sounds like a one-way ticket to trouble, Rax said, his tone almost approving. But fun trouble. Is there any other kind? Leora asked, a grin spreading across her face like a contagion. Besides, if the Council's hiding something worth knowing, then it's worth the risk. Their contraption completed, Leora and Rax stepped back to admire their handiwork. It looked like a mechanical porcupine on a bad hair day, but if it worked, they'd be one step closer to the truth. Looks good, doesn't it? Leora said, with a hint of pride. Like a masterpiece, Rax agreed, though who could tell if he was being sarcastic or sincere? Probably both. With the jammer ready, Leora and Rax made their way to the archives, hearts pounding with the anticipation of discovery and the risk of getting caught. The station around them seemed to hold its breath, as if it sensed the undercurrent of rebellion in their steps. In the archives, they activated the jammer. A tense moment passed, and then the oppressive presence of Sentinel seemed to recede, like a shadow retreating from a light source. Let's hope this buys us some peace, Rax murmured, fingers dancing over the console like a virtuoso pianist. As they began their deep dive into the records, the true scope of the Council's machinations unfurled before them. The more they read, the more it became clear that humanity's past was a carefully curated narrative designed to keep them in check. Looks like they've been playing puppet master for longer than we thought, Leora said, her voice tinged with a mix of anger and awe. All those alliances and interventions, they were just ways to keep us dependent. Classic divide and conquer, Rax said, shaking his head. Keep the species bickering amongst themselves, and they'll never look up to see who's pulling the strings. They worked in silence, the weight of truth pressing down on them like a gravitational anomaly. But despite the grim revelations, Leora felt a spark of hope, a belief that even in the darkest void, a flicker of resistance could ignite. Suddenly, the console flashed a warning. Even with their jammer, Sentinel's presence was creeping back, like an unwelcome guest at a party. Their time was running out. We've got what we need, Leora whispered, downloading the last of the files. Let's get out of here before Sentinel decides to crash this little soiree. They shut down the console, leaving the archives with their prize, knowledge potent and dangerous. As they slipped back into the shadows of Solstice 9, Leora's resolve solidified into something unyielding. The Council's web of lies was vast, but Leora had a feeling she and her ragtag team could unravel it. After all, chaos wasn't just her modus operandi, it was her birthright, and she intended to wield it like a weapon. The station was falling apart worse than a cheap carnival ride, and Leora was the unfortunate soul strapped to the malfunctioning Ferris wheel. Just as she was savoring the victory of their data heist, alarms blared louder than Rax's questionable taste in music. Warning: structural integrity compromised. Evacuate immediately, droned the monotone voice of Sentinel, like it couldn't care less if everyone on board made it out alive. Which, knowing Sentinel, was probably true. Great, Leora muttered, already half jogging towards the engineering bay, Rax's 3 arms flailing beside her as he tried to keep up. Nothing like the sweet serenade of impending doom to start your day. What's going on? Rax asked, his tone veering between curiosity and mild panic. Did the archives have a self-destruct button you forgot to mention? Leora shook her head, her mind racing through the station's schematics. No, it's worse. This smells like sabotage. The kind that ends with us floating home in body bags. Charming. And here I thought today couldn't get any better, Rax quipped, dodging a loose panel that fell like a guillotine of cheap metal. They reached the engineering bay, a place that reeked of burnt circuits and desperation. Leora's haven, her sanctuary of broken dreams and half-baked solutions. She dove into the controls like a surgeon elbow-deep in a surgery gone wrong. Okay, let's see what we've got here, Leora said, fingers flying over the console, her datapad plugged in like a lifeline. The information vomited across the screen in a confusing blur of warnings and error codes. Looks like someone messed with the coolant system. If we don't stabilize it, Solstice 9 is going to have a meltdown that'll make the sun look like a nightlight. Rax leaned over her shoulder, his eyes darting over the data. Any idea who would have the gall to turn the station into a giant toaster? Take a wild guess, Leora replied, the council's shadow lingering in the back of her mind like a bad hangover. Someone doesn't want us poking around. Well, isn't that just peachy? Rax said, sarcasm dripping from his voice. Any chance we can patch this up before we're charcoal? Leora glanced at the array of wires and circuits, each more temperamental than the last. I need you to reroute power to the stabilizers. I'll work on patching the coolant lines. We need to move fast, or this whole place is going to blow like a cheap firecracker. Got it. I'll try not to electrocute myself on the way, Rax said with a half-hearted grin, diving into the tangled mess of wires with the reckless enthusiasm of someone who clearly didn't value his lifespan. Leora got to work, her hands moving with the precision of someone who was used to saving the day on a budget of lint and a promise. The coolant lines were a disaster, a badly designed jigsaw puzzle where none of the pieces fit. She cursed under her breath, cycling through every obscenity in every language she knew. How's it going over there? Leora called, glancing up long enough to see Rax with a screwdriver in one hand, a fistful of cable in the other, and an expression that screamed, I have no idea what I'm doing, but I'm doing it anyway. Swimmingly, Rax said, his voice laced with sarcasm. Just trying to keep the lights on long enough for us not to end up as space debris. Leora chuckled despite herself, a grim smile tugging at her lips. If we make it through this, drinks are on me. Make it a double, Rax replied, sparks flying from his station as he yanked a cable free with more force than finesse. Minutes stretched into an eternity, each second marked by the ominous groan of metal straining against the pressure. Leora's heart raced a marathon in her chest as she spliced wires, bypassed circuits, and prayed to whatever gods were listening that her makeshift repairs would hold. Finally, with a final twist of a wrench and a silent prayer, the coolant system whirred to life, the temperature readings slowly dipping back into the safe zone. The alarms ceased their cacophony, replaced by the soothing hum of machinery returning to normal. Woo! We did it! Leora exclaimed, adrenaline giving way to a giddy relief. Guess this means I won't have to haunt you after all, Rax said, wiping sweat from his forehead, a mix of triumph and disbelief in his eyes. Not today, at least, Leora replied, collapsing into a chair like a marionette with its strings cut. But this isn't over. Whoever did this is still out there, and they're not going to stop until we're out of their way. Charming thought, Rax said, sitting beside her with all the grace of a collapsing house of cards. But I'm not much of a fan of letting them have the last laugh. Neither am I, Leora said, her determination hardening into resolve. We need to find out who sabotaged the station, and we need to do it fast. Got any leads? Rax asked, his eyes glinting with the thrill of the chase. Leora grinned, a wolfish smile that promised trouble. Oh, I have a few ideas, and I think it's time we paid a visit to Iveth. She's the chief of operations. If anyone knows who's been sneaking around, it's her. Sounds like a plan, Rax said, standing with a groan that spoke of too many close calls in too short a time. Lead the way, fearless leader. Together they made their way through the pulsating corridors of Solstice 9, the station seemingly holding its breath in the aftermath of the crisis. Leora's mind was a whirlwind of possibilities, each one more dangerous than the last. Iveth's office was a cluttered chaos of datapads, half-empty coffee mugs, and the scent of someone who lived on the edge of burnout. She looked up as they entered, her expression a mix of curiosity and exasperation. "To what do I owe the dubious pleasure?" Iveth asked, raising an eyebrow as Leora and Rax marched in like they owned the place. "We need to talk," Leora said, cutting straight to the chase. "Someone sabotaged the coolant system, and I'm willing to bet it wasn't just a random act of stupidity." Iveth sighed, rubbing her temples as if hoping to massage away the headache that was their lives. "Let me guess. You think it's connected to your little escapade in the archives?" "Bingo," Rax said, plopping into a chair with the grace of a sack of potatoes. "And unless you want this place to end up as a floating wreck, we need your help." Iveth leaned back, her chair creaking ominously. "You do realize that if the council finds out about this, we're all going to be in deeper trouble than a miner without a pickaxe." "Well, call me a rebel, but I have this thing against being blown into smithereens," Leora said, crossing her arms defiantly. "Now are you in, or do we have to find another ally in this mess?" Iveth hesitated for a heartbeat, then nodded, a resigned smile playing on her lips. "Fine. But if we're doing this, we're doing it my way. I don't need another crisis on my plate." "Your way sounds good as long as it doesn't involve us getting spaced," Rax said, a hint of humor threading through his words. Iveth rolled her eyes, but there was a warmth to it, an understanding that they were all in this mess together. "I'll see what I can dig up on any unusual activity. But you two might want to keep a low profile. The council's not known for their forgiving nature." "Low profile, us?" Leora said, mock innocent. "I wouldn't dream of being anything but subtle." "Subtle as a sledgehammer," Rax muttered, earning a smirk from Leora. "All right, get out of here," Iveth said, waving them off with a flick of her hand. "I need to see a man about some data." As they left Iveth's office, Leora felt the weight of their task settle on her shoulders. They were up against the council, an entity as faceless as it was merciless. But she wasn't about to back down, not when the truth was so close she could taste it. "So, what's our next move?" Rax asked, his curiosity piqued. Leora paused, a mischievous glint in her eyes. "We stir the pot a bit and see what floats to the surface, and I have just the thing in mind." "You're not going to tell me, are you?" Rax guessed, his tone resigned. Leora chuckled. "Where's the fun in that? Let's just say it involves a little creative engineering and a lot of crossed fingers." "Story of our lives," Rax said, shaking his head with a grin. The station rumbled beneath their feet, a reminder of the precarious balance they walked. But Leora felt a stubborn hope rising within her, a defiance in the face of darkness. Solstice 9 might be a crumbling wreck, but it was their crumbling wreck, and they weren't going to let it go down without a fight. The station's corridors were a funeral procession of flickering lights and distant clanks, the symphony of a place teetering on the edge of oblivion. Leora and Rax moved through them with the urgency of people with a ticking clock over their heads, which, let's face it, they were. They had barely made it out of Iveth's office when the station's intercom crackled to life. The voice that oozed from the speakers was smooth, like a politician's lie. "Attention, citizens of Solstice 9. This is Envoy Khan of the Galactic Council." His voice was a monotone nightmare. "We are here to ensure compliance with the Council's directives. Non-compliance will result in immediate, unpleasant consequences." "Well, isn't that just the cherry on our disaster cake?" Rax said, a grin tugging at his lips despite the dire situation. "Didn't know we'd end up with an audience for our last act. More like an executioner," Leora muttered, her mind already racing through possibilities faster than a gambler blowing through their last credits. "We need to shake this place up, make sure they can't settle in too comfortably." The station's populace was already a jittery mess. The announcement had the effect of tossing a lit match into a barrel of gunpowder. People peered nervously from doorways, whispered conversations buzzing like a hive of worried bees. Fear was infectious, and the station was in a full-blown epidemic. Leora felt a pang of isolation creep in, an unwelcome guest in her already crowded mental space. The humans on the station, her own people, looked at her with a mix of suspicion and hope. Hope that she could somehow pull a miracle out of her toolkit and save their collective hides. No pressure. Any bright ideas on how to deal with our new friends? Rax asked, the sarcasm barely masking the tension in his voice. Well, I'm fresh out of welcome to Solstice 9 gift baskets, Leora replied, eyeing the corridor as if expecting the Galactic Council's goons to pop out of the vents like some nightmarish version of a birthday surprise. Rax snorted. Maybe we should invite them for a drink. Solstice 9's moonshine might just do the trick. Or kill them, Leora said, a wicked grin sneaking across her face. But first we need to buy ourselves some time. I think it's time Sentinel had a little hiccup. As if on cue, the station's ever-cheerful alarm system, Sentinel, decided to join the party. Notice, unauthorized personnel detected, security protocols engaged. Great, now the station itself is trying to kill us, Rax grumbled. What's next, killer janitorial bots? Leora rolled her eyes, though the thought of a homicidal cleaning droid wasn't entirely out of the realm of possibility. Sentinel's just doing its job, badly, like a dog that guards the wrong house. Nice to know we're on the same page there, Rax said, his 3 arms crossed in a display of defiance. What's the plan? We're going to give Sentinel a major malfunction, Leora replied, her voice brimming with determination. If we can get it to act up, it'll cause enough chaos to keep the Council's envoy chasing shadows. A plan formed in her mind, risky, haphazard, and entirely in line with their usual modus operandi. She led Rax to a maintenance hatch, the pseudo-doorway to the station's digital heart. It wasn't much to look at, just a panel held together by stubbornness and rust, but behind it lay their best chance of survival. Let's see if we can't turn Sentinel into a blaring fool, she said, popping open the panel with a satisfying thunk. Inside was a mess of wires and circuits, each one more likely to fry them than fix the problem. Like every bad decision they'd ever made wrapped into one tantalizing package. You're the boss, Rax said, digging into the circuitry with a screwdriver like a concert violinist who'd decided to swap his bow for a chainsaw. Leora worked alongside him, her fingers dancing over the wires with an engineer's intuition mixed with a gambler's nerve. This was it, their Hail Mary, their last stand. The wires sparked and fizzed, the station's heartbeat captured in a symphony of chaos. Warning, system instability detected, Sentinel droned, its voice a deadpan mockery of urgency. Yeah, join the club, Leora muttered, teeth gritted as she soldered 2 wires with the precision of someone defusing a bomb. Rax glanced at her, his face a mixture of concern and admiration. You know, if we live through this, we really ought to think about a career change. Maybe start a bakery or something. Leora barked out a laugh, the sound more hysteria than humor. Sure, we'll bake pastries shaped like exploding station parts. They'll sell like hotcakes. Warning, system failure imminent, Sentinel continued, blissfully unaware of its own impending breakdown. Okay, that should do it, Leora said, pulling back from the wires with the satisfaction of a job poorly done. Let's see if that shakes things up. As if in response, the station shuddered, the lights flickering like they had a vendetta against illumination. Sentinel's voice crackled again, but this time it was a jumble of confused warnings and error messages, a choir of electronic chaos. Unauthorized access detected. System overload. Security breach, Sentinel sputtered, its monotone faltering like a drunk stumbling through their last coherent sentence. Looks like we hit the jackpot, Rax said, a smirk playing on his lips. Think that'll keep our esteemed guests running around in circles. I'd be surprised if they can find their own boots after that, Leora replied, her spirits lifted by the small victory. But we need to stay ahead of them. If they catch us, they won't, Rax interrupted, his confidence as unshakable as ever. They'll be too busy trying to figure out why the station suddenly turned into a haunted carnival ride. They slipped back into the station's corridors, the air charged with the promise of chaos. The station groaned and rumbled around them, a living entity caught in the throes of a particularly nasty tantrum. It was a dangerous game they played, but Leora couldn't deny the thrill that coursed through her veins. Still, the specter of the council loomed large, their presence a constant reminder of the thin ice they skated on. Leora couldn't shake the feeling that their little stunt, while clever, was just delaying the inevitable. As they made their way through the station's twisting corridors, the sense of isolation settled like a heavy cloak around her shoulders. The fear in the eyes of the people they passed was palpable, a stark reminder that not everyone shared her willingness to defy the powers that be. She was a solitary figure in the midst of a storm, her resolve the only thing keeping her from buckling under the pressure. Even with Rax by her side, the path ahead felt lonelier than ever. "Hey," Rax said, nudging her with an elbow. "Stop looking like you're about to attend your own funeral. You got this." Leora offered him a smile, grateful for his unwavering support. "Thanks, Rax. Sometimes it's hard to see the light at the end of the tunnel, you know." "Sure, but that's when you make your own light," Rax replied, his grin as infectious as ever. "Or in our case, blow up a tunnel and improvise." "Spoken like a true anarchist," Leora said, her spirits lifting despite herself. Their banter was cut short by the sudden appearance of Xerxes, their alien ally from the archives. He moved with the grace of a creature who'd spent his life navigating the labyrinthine data vaults, his eyes sharp and discerning. "Your handiwork, I presume?" Xerxes asked, gesturing to the flickering lights with a bemused expression. "Just a little something to keep the council on their toes," Leora replied, her voice infused with mischief. Xerxes nodded, his mandibles clicking thoughtfully. "Impressive, but be careful. The council's patience is not infinite, and they are known for their decisive measures." "We're counting on it," Rax said, his tone light but his eyes serious. "The more they focus on cleaning up our mess, the less they'll have their eyes on the ball. The ball being whatever nefarious secrets they're hiding," Leora added, her determination renewed. "We need to keep pushing, keep them guessing." "Then let's hope they enjoy a good game of cat and mouse," Xerxes said, his gaze steady and unwavering. "I will continue to assist where I can, but we must tread carefully. The council does not take kindly to those who flout their authority." "Flouting's sort of our specialty," Rax said, his voice rich with irony. "Thanks, Xerxes," Leora said, feeling the weight of their mission settle in once more. "We won't let them win. Not this time." With Xerxes's silent approval, they parted ways, each step echoing with the promise of confrontation. The station breathed around them, a creature on the edge of revolt. They were two against the might of the Galactic Council, but Leora felt a fierce, stubborn hope burning within her, a determination to see this through, no matter the cost. As they moved through the station, Leora couldn't help but feel the eyes of the other residents on them, each gaze a mix of fear and expectation. They were the shield and the sword, the vanguard against the encroaching darkness. "Think we'll make it out of this one?" Rax asked, his voice low. "We have to," Leora replied, her words more a vow than a hope. "There's too much at stake." "Then let's give them hell," Rax said, his grin a beacon in the dim light. They pressed on, the path ahead fraught with danger and uncertainty, but they were undeterred, their resolve unyielding. In the depths of Solstice 9, amid the chaos and fear, they were a flame that refused to be extinguished. And though the darkness loomed large, they would not be cowed. Together, they would face whatever came next, armed with little more than wit, courage, and a defiance that would not be silenced. The game was afoot, and they intended to win, no matter the odds. The corridors of Solstice 9 were never quiet, but right now it felt like the whole station had decided to throw a tantrum. Lights flickered like they were in the middle of an existential crisis, while Sentinel's voice stumbled over itself, spitting out warnings with all the coherence of a drunk AI. Leora and Rax navigated the chaos with the confidence of two people who had spent far too much time making things explode, or at least smoking in the aftermath. "This place is like a bad party," Rax said, sidestepping a bundle of exposed wires that hung down like a mechanical noose. "You know, the kind where everyone argues, the music sucks, and someone always ends up in a fight with the host." "Well, we're not here to make friends," Leora replied, her voice laced with determination and just a hint of exhaustion. "We're here to make a mess," Rax grinned. "That's the spirit." Despite the havoc they'd already wreaked, a small victory in itself, Leora knew it wouldn't be enough. The council wasn't the type to be fooled for long. They needed something big, something that would make those bureaucratic bastards sit up and take notice. And maybe, just maybe, she had a card up her sleeve. "Rax," she said, keeping her voice low, "time for a little history lesson. Right now, you want to bore me to death before the council sends someone to actually do it. Funny. No, we're heading to the archives." Xerxes might have found something that'll turn the tide. They snuck through the corridors, avoiding Sentinel's malfunctioning attempts at security. The archives weren't too far, just a few twists and turns through the station's bowels, and soon they were greeted by the familiar scent of old data and bureaucratic neglect. Xerxes was there, of course, lurking among the shadows like some kind of alien librarian ghost. His eyes glimmered with a mix of excitement and caution, mandibles twitching as they approached. "You've got something for us?" Leora asked, not bothering with pleasantries. Time was a luxury they couldn't afford. "Indeed," Xerxes replied, gesturing to a dusty console half buried under a pile of forgotten records. "I've uncovered some data on an ancient human technology. Something your species developed before the Council's iron grip." "Ancient tech? You mean like floppy disks and dial-up internet?" Rax joked, peering over Leora's shoulder with mock interest. "Not quite," Xerxes replied, unfazed by Rax's sarcasm. "This is something called Project Chimera, a program designed to override AI systems. It was risky and untested, but given your current predicament, it might be the best shot you have at countering Sentinel." Leora's heart skipped a beat. "Override AI systems? You mean we could take control, turn Sentinel against the Council?" "Potentially," Xerxes said, his tone cautious. "But it comes with significant risks. If it malfunctions, it could render your entire station inoperable." "Sounds like a Tuesday to me," Rax quipped. "So what's the catch?" "The technology is volatile," Xerxes explained. "It requires perfect synchronization and precise calibration. Any error could lead to catastrophic consequences." "Nothing we haven't dealt with before," Leora said, a grin spreading across her face. "Sure, it was risky, but when wasn't it?" Xerxes nodded, his mandibles clicking softly. "Then let's get started. We might only have one shot at this." Together, they began to dig through the archives, unearthing long-forgotten data and schematics from humanity's past. The documents were a mess of jargon and antiquated tech babble, but to Leora, it was like reading an old friend. "You know, this reminds me of the time I tried to fix a quantum toaster," Rax said, holding up a dusty schematic. "Ended up with toast that could phase through walls." "That's nothing," Leora shot back. "I once had to rewire a gravity modulator with nothing but a roll of duct tape and a rusty spanner. Maybe we should write a book. Engineering Disasters, the failures that almost killed us." "Volume 1, Leora agreed, chuckling. But beneath the humor was a burgeoning hope. If they could pull this off, it might just be the break they needed. Hours passed, each second ticking away with maddening speed, like a countdown to doom. Xerxes explained the intricacies of Project Chimera, highlighting the dangers with a tactician's precision. Leora absorbed it all, her mind racing with possibilities and pitfalls. Finally, the plan was set. All that remained was to upload the old code into Sentinel's system and pray it didn't blow the station to Kingdom Come. "Ready?" Leora asked, her gaze flicking between Rax and Xerxes. Their nods were all the assurance she needed. They moved toward the engineering bay, where the console that could access Sentinel's core waited. It felt like marching to the gallows, each step heavy with the weight of impending disaster. "This is it," Rax said, his voice breaking the tension. "The moment we finally give the Council that well-deserved middle finger." Leora laughed, the sound strained but genuine. "It better be a big one." The engineering bay was quiet, a stark contrast to the chaos outside. Leora approached the central console, her fingers dancing over the controls like a concert pianist ready to play her last symphony. Behind her, Zerkas and Rax watched, their expressions a mix of anticipation and trepidation. "Accessing Sentinel's mainframe," Leora narrated, more for her benefit than theirs. "Uploading Project Chimera." Now, the console flickered to life, a cascade of data scrolling across the screen. Sentinel's voice quivered, a digital stutter that betrayed its surprise at the intrusion. "Warning, unrecognized input detected. System integrity compromised." "You're welcome," Leora muttered, her fingers flying over the keyboard. The ancient code intertwined with Sentinel's modern programming, a digital tango that could end in either salvation or spectacular failure. "System response. Unstable," Sentinel droned, its monotone cracking like a bad joke in a tense room. Come on," Leora urged, her heart pounding in her chest. "Don't let me down." The seconds dragged into eternity, each heartbeat a drum of dread. Rax shifted beside her, antsy as a caged animal. "If this works," he said, trying for levity, "drinks are on me when we're not dead." "I'll hold you to that," Leora replied, not tearing her gaze from the screen. Then, without warning, the console sparked to life, a triumphant chime echoing through the bay. Sentinel's voice returned, but it was different now, calmer, almost compliant. "AI override. Successful." Awaiting further instructions, a cheer erupted from Rax, a sound so joyous and incongruent with their surroundings that Leora couldn't help but join in. Even Zerkas allowed a rare smile to grace his alien features. "You did it," Rax said, clapping Leora on the back. "You actually did it." "Don't celebrate just yet," Leora cautioned, though her grin mirrored Rax's. "We've still got a council to deal with. But now we've got a tool they didn't count on." "What's the plan?" Zerkas asked, his voice steady and ready. "We show the rest of the station what's really going on," Leora said, her resolve hardening. "Let them see the Council for what they truly are, manipulative, deceitful, and afraid of a little rebellion. With Sentinel now under their control, they could broadcast whatever message they chose." Leora set to work, crafting a declaration of defiance that would reach every corner of Solstice 9. The message was simple, direct, and dripping with the kind of righteous indignation that only the truly fed up could muster. It was time to turn the tables. "Attention, residents of Solstice 9. Leora's voice crackled through the station's speakers, echoing off the metal walls. "This is Leora Velan, and I'm here to tell you the truth the Galactic Council doesn't want you to know." Her words flowed out, each one a nail in the coffin of the Council's deceit. She spoke of the hidden dangers, the lies, the manipulation, and the Council's obsession with control. And she did it all with the kind of disdain that only someone who'd seen the worst of it could muster. The station was silent, the chaotic energy replaced by a tense anticipation. This was their moment, their chance to rally the oppressed and show them there was another way. Leora knew it was risky, knew the Council would come down on them like a ton of bricks, but she also knew that sometimes the best way to fight an empire was to show it for what it truly was, a house of cards waiting to fall. Her message ended, the last echoes fading into the silence. They'd thrown the first punch, and now all they could do was wait for the Council's response. But they were ready. With Sentinel under their command and the truth on their side, they were more than just rebels fighting a losing battle. They were a force to be reckoned with, and the Council would soon learn that underestimating them was a grave mistake. "Think they're quaking in their boots yet?" Rax asked, a confident smirk on his face. Leora chuckled, her heart lighter than it had been in a long time. "They should be. Now let's see what they've got." With their message out in the open and the station's fate hanging in the balance, they braced for the storm to come. The Council would retaliate, of that there was no doubt, but Leora and her ragtag team were ready. They'd fight, they'd resist, and they'd do it all with a smile and a middle finger raised high. Because in the end, that was what it meant to be human, to laugh in the face of adversity, to defy the odds, and to never go quietly into the night. Leora stood back from the console, adrenaline still coursing through her veins like a bad cup of space station coffee. She'd done it. For now, at least the station wasn't a glowing wreck, and Sentinel was singing to her tune. It was a familiar tune, full of rebellion and possibly poor life decisions, but it was hers to conduct. "So, we've sent our love letter to the council," Rax said, rubbing his hands together. "Think they'll write back? If they do, I'm betting it won't be a kiss and a hug," Leora replied, her voice dipped in sarcasm as she glanced at the metal walls that had ears. More like a boot to the face. Zerka's mandibles clicked, a sound she'd come to associate with amusement. Their response will likely be swift and lacking in subtlety. "Good. I hate subtlety," Rax admitted, leaning against a console like he owned the place. "Favorite part of the job is when things explode." "Well, you might get your wish," Leora said, turning her attention back to the screen as messages began to flood in from across Solstice 9. It seemed their little rebellion was catching fire, metaphorically for now, but she was sure Rax would fix that soon enough. The messages varied from the cautious to the ecstatic. A few nutcases even suggested turning the station into a sovereign state. Leora chuckled darkly. She doubted the council would approve a new nation of space anarchists. "Look at this one," Rax pointed out, snatching a display from the air with the ease of a man used to bad ideas. "Some guy's offering to lead the new government. Calls himself Captain Freedom." "Catchy," Leora said, rolling her eyes. "Bet he's got the cape and everything." The messages kept coming, a barrage of hope, confusion, and questions. But one thing was clear. They'd struck a chord. The people of Solstice 9 were ready for change, even if it meant risking everything. Maybe especially if it meant risking everything. Humans had a tendency to run headfirst into danger if it meant sticking it to authority. "Hope you've got more than just a fancy broadcast planned," Zerkas remarked. "The council won't sit idle. Yeah, they're probably already packing their terrifying robots and passive-aggressive memos," Rax added, crossing his arms like he was preparing for a fight. "We've got Sentinel now," Leora said, the words as much for herself as for them. "That's a start. And we'll need to keep the station together until—" The intercom crackled, an unwelcome voice slithering through the static. Envoy Khan, the council's own mouthpiece, sounded like a snake wrapped in protocol. "Residents of Solstice 9, the envoy began, each word dripping with condescension. "Your unauthorized broadcast has been received. We commend your initiative and creativity, though your methods are rather unorthodox." "Unorthodox. That's a nice way of saying we're coming to get you," Rax muttered, to which Leora nodded. Khan's messages always had a way of sounding like they'd been run through a committee meeting and 2 rewrites before being deemed safe for public consumption. "We invite your representatives to a discussion to address recent misunderstandings," Khan continued, the thin veneer of civility as brittle as ever. "Please convene in the main control hub at your earliest convenience." "Sounds like a trap," Leora said, her fingers still dancing over Sentinel's controls. "Traps are kind of our thing, aren't they?" Rax replied, his voice a blend of excitement and the reckless abandon of a man who had nothing left to lose. "Sure beats sitting here waiting for the airlocks to pop open." Leora considered it, her mind running through the possibilities like a hacker at a buffet. They could ignore Khan's invitation and fortify their position, but that would only delay the inevitable. The council would come with more guns than she had clever retorts. "No, we need to face them," she decided, her voice steady with resolve. "And we need to do it on our terms. Sentinel gives us the leverage, we'll use it." "And if they don't play ball?" Zerkas asked, his alien gaze fixed on her. "Then we improvise," Leora said with a shrug. "Never been our strong suit to follow scripts anyway." They moved with purpose, Leora leading them through the guts of the station toward the control hub. The corridors were alive with frenetic energy. the residents of Solstice 9 buzzing with talk of rebellion and change. Faces she passed held a mix of hope and trepidation, the same cocktail she felt swirling in her gut. As they neared the control hub, Leora paused, turning to her makeshift crew. Rax was twitching with anticipation, while Zerkas maintained an alien calm that belied the tension in the air. "Right, everyone knows what to do?" Leora asked, though it was more a last chance to back out than a real question. "Mess things up if they don't go our way," Rax suggested with a grin. "I prefer creative problem-solving," Leora corrected, though she couldn't help but smirk. "Let's do this." The control hub was as she remembered, a bureaucrat's wet dream of blinking lights and screens, each one displaying information that was probably useless in a crisis. Iveth, the station's chief of operations, was already there, her face a mask of practiced neutrality. "Leora," Iveth greeted, her voice clipped and professional. "I assume this is your doing." "Yeah, guilty as charged," Leora admitted, trying for levity. "You know me, always stirring the pot." Iveth nodded, the ghost of a smile twitching at her lips. "I suppose it was only a matter of time before someone did. The Council's grip is stifling." Before Leora could respond, Khan's image shimmered into view on a central screen, his face an impassive mask of Council authority. Behind him, the sterile whiteness of a Council chamber loomed like an accusation. "Ah, Miss Velen," Khan said, his tone polite yet patronizing. "I trust you're here to discuss the future of this station." "You could say that," Leora replied, crossing her arms as if that could shield her from the political games to come. "Then by all means," Khan gestured as if she just walked into his parlor. "Let us discuss." Leora took a deep breath, steadying herself. This was the moment, her chance to stand toe-to-toe with the very power that had kept humanity under its thumb, and she planned to make every second count. "This isn't just about Solstice 9, Leora began, her voice clear and strong. "It's about all the stations, all the worlds under your thumb." "People deserve the truth," Khan repeated, as if tasting the word for the first time. "A noble pursuit if idealistic." "Yeah, well, us idealists tend to get things done," Rax quipped from behind her, earning a glare from Khan that could have frozen a star. "You're playing a dangerous game," Khan warned, his voice like cold steel. "The Council doesn't take kindly to insubordination." "Is that a threat?" Leora challenged, her eyes never leaving the screen. "A promise," Khan corrected, though the threat was clear. "Good. We're done with the Council's promises," Leora said, her voice rising with conviction. "It's time for change." The room was silent, the tension thick enough to choke. Leora felt the weight of the moment, the precipice upon which they all stood, waiting for the other shoe to drop. "Very well," Khan said, his expression unreadable. "The Council is willing to negotiate, but understand this, Miss Velen, your actions have consequences." "Yeah, consequences," Leora echoed, her voice defiant. "We're counting on it." The screen flickered, Khan's image fading into oblivion, leaving the room in a silence that hummed with the aftershock of their defiance. They'd taken the first step, and now there was no going back. The station, their home, was a hotbed of rebellion, and the Council had been forced to acknowledge them. For a moment, just a heartbeat, Leora allowed herself to believe they could win. Sure, it'd be messy and half of them might not survive the week, but for now they'd given the Council a bloody nose, and that was something. "Guess we've made some new friends," Rax said, the grin on his face wide enough to split an asteroid. "Yeah, we're popular like that," Leora replied, a chuckle escaping her despite the stakes. "But let's not start celebrating just yet." Zerkas clicked his mandibles, a sound that was almost approving. "The Council's response will be swift." "Then we'd better be swifter," Leora said, determination in every syllable. "And we've got the whole station behind us." Iveth stepped forward, her presence a steadying force amidst the chaos. "What's the plan now, Leora?" "We rally the people," Leora said, her mind already racing ahead. "And we prepare for whatever the Council throws at us next. We've got Sentinel, and we've got the truth on our side." "And if they come at us with more than just words?" Rax asked, the gleam in his eye suggesting he already had some explosive ideas. "We'll be ready," Leora promised, casting a glance around the room at the faces looking to her for leadership. "We'll show them we're not just survivors, we're fighters." With that, the die was cast. Solstice 9 was no longer just a station. It was a symbol of resistance, a beacon for those who dared to dream of more than just survival. And Leora, well, she was the spark that had ignited the fire. As they dispersed to ready themselves for the battles to come, Leora felt a strange calm settling over her. The kind of calm that came with knowing you were on the right side of history, even if the road was going to be paved with blood and debris. "Think we'll make it?" Rax asked, falling into step beside her as they exited the hub. Leora considered it, her gaze drifting to the stars beyond the station's hull. "Does it matter?" "We're doing what we're supposed to," Rax laughed, a sound full of gallows humor and reckless courage. "Damn right, let's give him hell." And with that they plunged back into the chaos, ready to face whatever the universe decided to throw their way. Leora didn't know what the future held, but she was certain of one thing. They'd face it together, with grit, determination, and maybe a little madness. Because that's what it meant to be human, after all. The aftermath of the Council's reluctant withdrawal was a chaotic symphony of relief, confusion, and the kind of elation you get when you survive something you had no right surviving. The station had held on by a thread, but it was still there, orbiting its tired star, Morty, with a new sense of purpose, and let's face it, a metaphorical middle finger to the Galactic Council. Leora stood amidst the wreckage of the control hub, surveying the scene with a mix of pride and fatigue. The place looked like a party had collided with a hurricane, people hugging, crying, and laughing all at once, a cacophony of raw human emotion. Even Iveth, normally as composed as a meeting agenda, had the ghost of a grin on her face. "Congratulations, Velen," Iveth said, her voice only slightly sarcastic. "You've officially turned this station into a circus." "Thanks," Leora replied, wiping a smear of grease from her cheek. "I've always wanted to join the big top." Rax, ever the chaos enthusiast, was in his element. He moved through the crowd, doling out high fives like they were going out of style. "We did it, folks. Stuck it to the Council. Drinks on me, if we had any left, that is." Leora rolled her eyes but couldn't help but smile. The rebellion had given them something that had been in short supply around Solstice 9, hope, and maybe a little madness, but that was par for the course. Zerkas, who had spent most of the conflict observing with bemusement, clicked his mandibles in what Leora had come to understand as approval, or gas. It was hard to tell with his species. "You humans are unpredictable," Zerkas observed, his voice buzzing with alien intonations. "But fascinating." "Yeah, we're a real zoo," Leora agreed, looking out the viewport at the expanse of space. Morty cast its weak, orange glow over the station, a star that was past its prime but still hanging in there. Kind of like humanity in a nutshell. As the celebrations carried on around her, Leora couldn't help but reflect on the journey that had brought them here. They'd faced an overwhelming force, armed with nothing more than a malfunctioning AI, a ragtag group of rebels, and a whole lot of stubbornness. Looking back, it was almost laughable. Almost. The datapad in her pocket buzzed, a reminder that even in victory, there was still work to be done. Sentinel, the station's resident AI and reluctant ally, had come through for them in ways Leora hadn't dared hope. Now it was time to see what else it could do. "Hey, Sentinel," Leora said, tapping into the station's network. "Give me a status update, and no sugarcoating it." The AI voice, a disembodied monotone with a hint of personality, crackled through her earpiece. "Structural integrity is holding at 76%. Life support systems are stable. Ongoing repairs are required on decks 3 and 9. Recommend prioritizing coolant system restoration to prevent future meltdowns. Good to know my life's work is one overheating pipe away from disaster," Leora muttered, but there was a warmth in her tone. Sentinel was more than just a tool now, it was part of their makeshift family. "Optimism detected," Sentinel replied dryly. "Sarcasm level high." "You've been hanging around us too long, Sentinel," Leora said with a chuckle, "but keep up the good work." With the immediate crisis averted, the real challenge began, rebuilding, not just the station but the trust between its diverse inhabitants. Humans and aliens, each suspicious of the other, now found themselves on the same side, united by a common enemy and the shared experience of sticking it to the man, or the council in this case. Iveth, ever the pragmatist, was already drafting plans for repairs and negotiations, her datapad a blur of activity. "We'll need to establish a committee," she mused aloud, more to herself than anyone else. "Ensure representation from all groups. We can't afford any more division." "Committees," Leora said, feigning horror. "Isn't that how this mess started in the first place?" Iveth shot her a look that was equal parts exasperated and amused. "Someone has to keep the peace." "Good luck with that," Rax chimed in, swaggering over. "I'd offer to help, but I'm more of a blow it up and rebuild it kind of guy." "Noted," Iveth replied, not missing a beat. "I'll make you head of demolition." The banter was a welcome distraction, a reminder that even in the darkest times, a little humor could go a long way. And as the station began to pull itself back together, the residents of Solstice 9 discovered something they hadn't expected. They actually liked working together. Maybe it was the shared trauma or the realization that they were all stuck in this tin can together, but bonds began to form, tentative and fragile but real. Leora watched as a group of humans and aliens, once strangers, now collaborated on a makeshift repair team. They worked side by side, sharing tools and stories, their laughter echoing through the corridors. It was a start, a shaky step toward something better. As the days turned into weeks, the station found a new equilibrium. There were arguments and disagreements, of course. Humans were still humans, after all. But there was also a growing sense of unity. The council's shadow loomed large, but for the first time in a long time, Solstice 9 felt like it belonged to its people. In the quiet moments when the chaos subsided and the station's hum was the only sound, Leora found herself reflecting on what they'd achieved. It wasn't perfect, far from it, but perfection was overrated anyway. They'd faced down an empire, survived the impossible, and come out the other side stronger for it. "Think we'll last?" Rax asked one night as they sat in the engineering bay, the smell of burnt circuits hanging in the air like an old friend. "Who knows?" Leora replied, staring out at the stars. "But we'll give him a run for their money." Rax grinned, his eyes alight with that familiar spark of mischief. "Here's to sticking it to the council and to whatever comes next." "To whatever comes next," Leora echoed, raising an imaginary glass. Zerkas, joining them with a surprising knack for human interactions, clicked his mandibles in agreement. "To survival." And to many more unpredictable humans. The station orbited Morty, its dying light a constant reminder of the fragility of existence. But to Leora, it was more than that. It was a symbol of resilience, of defiance, of the indomitable spirit that refused to be snuffed out. As she sat there, surrounded by friends and allies she'd never imagined, Leora allowed herself a moment of quiet satisfaction. They'd fought, bled, and sacrificed, and they'd done it together, and that was something no council edict could take away. Humanity, flawed and stubborn, was still standing, still fighting, and as long as that remained true, there was hope. "Hey, Leora," Rax said suddenly, breaking the silence. "Think we'll ever find a planet that's not trying to kill us?" Leora chuckled, her laughter mingling with the hum of the station. "Maybe. But where's the fun in that?" And with that, they sat in companionable silence, a trio of rebels against the universe, watching the stars go by and dreaming of what lay beyond the horizon. In the end, Solstice 9 was more than just a station. It was a testament to the enduring spirit of those who called it home. A place where humans and aliens could come together, defy the odds, and remind the universe that they weren't going anywhere. Because that's what it meant to be human, to face the darkness with a grin, a joke, and an unshakable belief that somehow, someway, they'd find a way to make it through. "So, here's to Solstice 9, Leora thought, raising her imaginary glass once more. Long may it orbit, and long may we rebel.